If you say that you want to grow and you're spending like you want to maintain, then that's not a marketing problem, it's a math problem. Welcome to the Contractor's Edge, the show where we break down the tips, tools, and tactics that you need to grow your home service business. Whether you're in a truck or at the office, we're here to give you the edge that you need to win. I'm your host, Mike Stiers, and today's just a little bit different. We had a curveball. Anthony's out sick, so I'm going to run this one solo. Topic for today is really a question that I get all the time. Business owners could be any size, honestly. So they always want to know, what percentage of revenue should I budget for my marketing and advertising spend? So I'm going to share my philosophy, and it might be a little bit different. You may have heard something similar before, but I always try to make this relatable. So I'm going to give you a simple way to think about it, and it's using two gauges, just like the dash on your truck. So you've got your RPMs and your MPH. So in your truck, the RPMs tell you how hard you're working the machine, and the MPH tells you how fast you're actually moving. So in your business, we're going to use the same idea. So the marketing RPM is actually the percentage of your revenue that you're feeding back into your marketing and advertising, and that's your revs. So the revenue MPH is your speed in millions per year. You're going to have to, be creative in that mindset, but one MPH is 1 million in revenue for the company. 5 MPH is a $5 million company, and 20 MPH is a $20 million company. On top of that, you have road conditions. So we're going to think competition, seasonality, demand, the economy, politics, all the fun stuff that we know impacts the business. We like to think it doesn't, but man, we can feel every bit of it. So when the hill gets steeper and like headwinds are strong, then it's going to take more RPMs just to maintain that speed that you're at. Once you get a better understanding of these two gauges, the marketing percentage question does get a lot easier. So you're going to see that a $1 million company and a $30 million company can't even be in the same conversation. You shouldn't even look at it the same way. And I'm going to help you to understand that. I'm not going to build the entire marketing plan on this episode. My goal is to give you a clear framework that you can use to look at your own numbers and then decide if you're underinvesting or if your expectations are out of sync with reality. So let's jump into the two gauge model. So gauge number one is the RPM. This is the marketing RPM and equals the marketing percentage as a share of revenue. This is really how hard you're pushing your machine to achieve your desired results. If you've listened to Anthony and I in the past, you know that we really like to look at 3 levels on this. And it's really maintain, which lives around 7% of revenue, grow, which is about 10%. And then we say dominate, but I know Anthony keeps getting on me and he says, hey, these days, sometimes we have to be at 13% to even be aggressive. It used to be 13% was like this state of domination, but we'll go with aggressive at 13%. So gauge number 2 is going to be your revenue MPH, and that's your millions per year in revenue. This is really how fast or how big your business is. So we kind of scale this into a few different areas, and then this is what comes out of our experience. When we first started the agency, we were working with a lot of startups as well as the organizations that we kind of like grew out of, which were in the $13 and $20 million range. So when we look at each of these segments, you'll kind of get a picture as we go through each example. So we've got a chuck and a truck. Those are typically one-man operation under $1 million. You've got your 1 to 3 million pass, then your 3 to 7 million, the 7 to 10 million, 10 to 20 million, and then 20 million plus. If you remember nothing else from this episode, just remember the 3 numbers, the 7, 10, and 13, because this is really going to give you your basic gauge that I start with. And then I'll kind of nudge it up or down depending on what the size is, and obviously saturation in the market, and then level of competition. So the one-man operation is really under 1 million. So for the marketing RPM, it's not really a true marketing percentage at this point because you're really still building the business. The revenue MPH, that's another one that's going to be difficult because you're a small company, you're limited on cash, and it's really about hustle at this point. So most of the owners at this stage are still wearing all the hats. You're the marketer, you're customer service, you're the sales representative, you're the installer, accounting, and even the service tech. Most of your leads are coming from referrals, friends, family, even repeat customers from like early on in the mission. You are probably doing some lead aggregators, Angie's List, Home Advisor, Thumbtack, Porch, maybe even Nextdoor. You might have a basic website at this point. We always laugh because this is typically, well, I know a guy or I've got someone local and somebody spins you up a Wix site or something like that. The focus really should be on your local business profile. So let's use the Google business profile as an example. You're going to want to build that out, get your pictures, your hours, your location. If you do have a website, get your URL. Just make it easy for the people to see who you are, what you do in the area that you service, and then focus on reviews because that's really going to be what moves the needle early on, and it helps you in that map set. For SEO, at this point, there's no SEO program. If you have a website, it's just going to be basic information that you've put in place. So you do need a simple site so that you're not scaring people away. A lot of people just throw up their Google business profile and think, oh, yep, now I'm an official business. But if a homeowner wants to do a little bit more research, you have to make sure that you have a website and you've got that information on there. Along with that, you've got to be asking for reviews. So you're going to need to start working on that process. At this level, Angie and Thumbtack and the other aggregators are really the training wheels that are going to help you learn to balance your bike. You can grind your way close to $1 million on referrals and what we call rented leads. But if you want to build your actual company, then the next step is going to be to start shifting some of that advertising budget and effort into marketing that you actually own. Your revenue MPH is really low here. So the extra bit of marketing RPM actually feels huge, and it can often be painful, but that's how you build momentum and you get yourself out of the truck. The next stage is the 1 to 3 million stage. So for marketing RPM, we say that this is really just the maintaining in that cycle, because the company itself is scaling, but you're investing in adding people so that you can kind of delegate some of the responsibilities. And then you're slowly introducing your advertising. So at this point, your advertising spend's probably about 5 to 7% of the revenue. With that being said, if you are in that $1 to $3 million band and you tell me, hey, Mike, I want real growth, I'm not just looking to maintain or survive, I expect to see your marketing RPM somewhere in the 7 to 10%. I know we're saying at this point you're probably investing in different places in the marketing and advertising, potentially additional people, but if you're under 5%, then you're just underfueling the machine and it's really going to stagnate your growth. The revenue MPH, you've moved from under that 1 MPH into that $1 to $3 million in revenue annually. So your business actually has some speed at this point, but you're very sensitive to like the hills and the headwinds. You can feel any change that's happening in the competition and the economy, even in the weather and the way that it might impact your business. So at this point, you should be investing in at least your own basic SEO. So technical cleanup of the site, real service pages, not just one giant single page scroller or a wall of text. Adding in your first service area or like city service pages, and then working on citations and like on-page structure. It probably sounds pretty Greek at this point, but I'm just listing this out so that you've got the fundamentals you can lean into. Really focus on some light content creation. If you can get a few case studies up each month, or at least one per month, then that's really going to help to answer some of the questions that homeowners have about your business. And it's going to just show proof of the work that you're doing that can then be shared out across social media. Oftentimes, this is where you're transitioning from that one-man operation. So aggregators are still the life support for your business. The majority of your leads are still going to come from your Angies and your Thumbtack, even referrals at this point. But as you move towards that 3 million in that growth gear, you're going to start to notice that things are changing. And this is when you should really shift more of your budget into optimizing your local business profiles, investing in getting more reviews. Look at the local service ads on Google. We call that low-hanging fruit. Standard search ads, probably a good idea. Even look at, Microsoft. Meta lead forms can start to get into this area because it can start to give you more brand awareness, and then just focusing more and more on your own website. So in that 1 to 3 million range, the aggregators go from actually being your lifeline to kind of becoming the side dish. So as you're growing, you're now investing in additional things, and they're not the entire meal anymore. The next stage is $3 to $7 million. And this is where things really get exciting, because now you're actually building a machine, and you'll see where that RPM and the MPH idea kind of comes to life. So when we're looking at, the RPMs at this point, we're in a growth stage. So this is a 7 to 10% is what we're going to ask you to invest. If you're a $5 million company and you're serious about jumping to 7, then you're not going to do that with a 5 to 7%. You actually need to be closer to like an 8 to 10% range for that reason. At this point for investment, you're really going to focus on SEO. You're at an intermediate level, so this is typically a bigger package if you're with an agency, really focusing on breaking out every single service, the city's service pages, case studies, FAQs, blogs, guides, anything that really ties into purposeful content, and actually talks about like the real problems and the solutions that you provide. You're also going to want to be focusing on link building, local associations, vendors, sponsorships, even community involvement. These are great ways to kind of tie that back in and get some of that domain authority. And then you're really needing to focus on better tracking for like call and form attribution. In the earlier stages, we often see that businesses just aren't focused on that. By the time you're in this range, it has to be a core focus. We laugh because at this point, you really stop even thinking about the aggregators and you're more into a diversification of lead sources that you actually own yourself. So you're really looking at your Google and Microsoft search ads, Google LSAs, Meta, and now you're even going into a little bit of YouTube, and exciting, you get your first taste of television or even OTT, which is over the top advertising. This is where now, instead of 100% lead gen, you're bringing in some additional branding efforts, and that will actually lower your cost per lead. So the more serious that your growth gear is, the less you should actually be dependent on lead aggregators at this stage, and the more that you should be moving your dollars into the channels that you own and control, website search and social. So your marketing RPM is intentionally higher because your revenue MPH target is higher. So you're climbing now and not coasting. The next stage is $7 to $10 million. And this is really where you start to hear something very different. And it's exciting because people are acknowledging your brand. If you've got something catchy in your commercials, they're likely, saying it back to you when they see you in the grocery store and you've got your gear on. This was always an exciting part for me because I was like, okay, our marketing and advertising efforts are being incredibly effective when people are singing your slogan back to you. We always said basement doctors on the job, and people would actually ask us, hey, are you on the job? And we'd be laughing because here we are wearing our branded gear, and they're recognizing us, and we know that our advertising efforts are actually working in that traditional sense. So when I'm looking at that 7 to 10 pace, this is where things get really challenging, though. And we kind of switch gears into that domination mode, or aggressive. Anthony, you'd be happy. So this is that 10 to 13%, especially if you're wanting to be the obvious first call on the market. And this is really where you need to have that focus. On the revenue MPH, in that $7 to $10 million range, you're moving fast in your DMA and you're competing against other serious brands. So it's no longer, the chuck in a truck. You're not competing necessarily on price. Sure, it's part of the equation, but the folks that want to do business with you are more concerned about how many years you've been in business, what your reviews look like, who you're sending into the home, how's your warranty, are you offering financing options, essentially proof. And, as a $7 to $10 million company, you should have plenty of proof. And this is usually the phase where the owners feel like they're spending more than ever. You can feel it. I've had these conversations with owners and you're like, oh my gosh, everything is just coming at me so fast. It's so loud. But that doesn't mean that you're necessarily overspending. It means that you're finally spending probably at the level required to break through that ceiling. And normally this is a glass ceiling. On the SEO diversification, this is actually at an advanced level. Exciting time because you're really a content engine. You're regularly developing high content that's tied into sales and service conversations. You've got a very strong local authority. You're appearing in the map pack. You're high up in the organic listings. You've invested heavily in reviews, and now you're really getting good video results. So you're taking any of the commercials that you had, you're extending it across YouTube, any of the social platforms. You should have it embedded on different pages on your website. And then you might be going out and getting a little bit more involved in capturing more videos out in the community, more case studies. and focusing a lot on the conversion optimization on the site. So, testing new headlines, calls to action, different layouts, even testing out different forms. All of this is very important in conversion rate optimization. When you're looking at the higher level of your channel mix, this is typically where you're on multiple television stations. You're really heavy into OTT so that you're targeting into specific neighborhoods. You're putting a certain home value on your targeting. You've got paid digital across Google and Microsoft. You're heavy into the LSAs to probably a point of where you're seeing a diminishing return, and so you're looking for other options. Getting heavier into the branding side with Meta. You've got YouTube. You're creating some demand, and you're utilizing remarketing. Um, by this point, you should have injected a bit of direct mail. We always like to think, high value into neighborhoods where you want to do business, or you're already having effective, jobs coming in on a regular basis, and you kind of want to take over the neighborhood. It's a lot easier to scale in these different neighborhoods when you've already got other neighbors you can lean into their work. Make sure that you've got a heavy focus at this point on your call center effectiveness. You really need to go back and reference the older episodes that we did where we talked about KPIs and sales metrics and marketing and advertising metrics. This is where that focus needs to be on conversion. Uh, Aggregators, maybe you've got a tiny aggregator presence, but it's really for a specific reason. This is where we would normally use it to kind of test in a specific zip code, or, maybe we're looking to add in some additional services. So we want to test those out. And aggregators are an easy way to do that. You just turn it on, and as long as you've got good reviews, it's something that you can almost get instantly. So by the time you're in that $7 to $10 million range, the aggregators are either gone or so small that they're no longer steering the ship. Your volume is coming from a diversified mix that you can actually control. And at this speed, a lot of the RPMs is about staying visible and above the noise. That's why we say it's branding. It's not necessarily about going faster, because you are going to have some of those challenges. You're probably capturing almost as many of the leads as you can in the area without pushing past a point where you're seeing diminishing returns. So the next stage typically comes at that $10 to $20 million. And this is where you're still using the same 7, 10, 13% logic, but the size of the dials start to pull that percentage down, because now you've got that saturation, but also because the base is larger. So at 7 to 10%, competition is going to play a factor, but you're in that $10 to $20 million range annually. So you have a lot of momentum. You've got a big customer base. You've got a bigger referral focus. You're getting more and more reviews. And so this is what's really helping you to scale at this point. And it makes you a bit more efficient. And you can actually see that in how far your advertising and marketing goes. On the SEO side, this is really more of a mature approach. The website's gone through several evolutions. You're likely looking at multiple location SEO strategy, or maybe you have additional branches. You probably have more of a content hub model. So if you've got multiple areas and maybe soil's different, or there's certain communities where you have different focuses, that's where you're going to start to have like these pillar pages, and you're going to have supporting articles for each of those. So as you're expanding, you might be in new DMAs, which means these are totally new television stations, different communities. And so you have to start to approach those the same way you did as you were scaling your business in one area. You have to be just as effective and mindful in those other areas. This is really where having a strong video and review footprint everywhere really helps out in strengthening your brand and awareness. We utilize a lot of data-driven strategies and calculated experiments. This is really a fun area where the goal is try to find what that next best opportunity is for lead generation, or elevating your branding, or diversifying yourself in that marketplace. It's really important too to think about the saturation. So I want to explain why there is that percentage drop when you do get bigger. So 10% of $3 million is 300,000, but then 10% of 20 million is $2 million. If you're in the same geography with the same set of services, there is a real ceiling on how much marketing you can spend efficiently. And at some point, more dollars do not create more demand. They just create more waste and a higher frequency on the same people. This is why we kind of switch that mindset. And this happens you see it from experience. So, as you're spending for all these things and you're trying to get more and more leads, your lead cost just goes up and you see, well, I'm not necessarily getting more leads and I'm spending more. So look for additional ways to potentially diversify or understand you may actually have to switch gears and, expand your service area geographically, or potentially add in some extra services. So we kind of see this go into a maintain gear. This is like 7 to 8% is often plenty, because now you've got repeat and referral business is so strong. Your organic and direct traffic is super high. As far as the growth gear, yeah, you could switch it up, but this would really be like a 9 to 10% and only needed if you're opening new branches, adding extra services, or pushing into another DMA that, connects with what you're already advertising to. That's where we see, okay, you're gonna have to push on the accelerator. You're gonna have to invest a little bit more, but because your brand is already established, it's a little bit easier to kind of bleed into those areas and expand out. Aggregators here, same purpose as the previous stage. I would really only recommend them if you need to test a new service in the city, or if you need to fill some temporary schedule gaps. This is always the way that we utilized it. So periodically we would turn on Angie's List. We always had it there to maintain it. We just weren't putting any budget behind it. But in the event that, cyclical downtrend, a competitor moves into your area, platform changes, then you really need to be able to turn on these aggregators and just have that steady, lead flow. So in this revenue band, the game shifts from volume to efficiency. You're not just asking, how do we get more leads, but you're asking, how do we get the right leads and protect our margin? And the final stage, from at least my experience, is like that 20 million plus stage. And this is where, for your marketing RPM, you're typically maintaining around like a 5 to 6% of your revenue. And you're looking to grow into new markets through acquisition. And if you're doing that, you might push the accelerator to like a 7 to 10% when you're having what we call push years. We always thought it out. We had a plan. We knew what it would potentially take to go out and generate some opportunities. We may have turned on some ads or some aggregators in the area just to test out the market and see if there was a place for our business. That's really the way that you should approach this as well. And when we're looking at the marketing MPH, when you're at that 20 million and beyond, it feels like you're in the big rig on the highway and you're almost in like this coasting stage, if you will. So at 20 million and beyond, the size dial is huge. The only reason that I want to see your marketing percentage jump back up would be if you're choosing to be in that higher gear. Are you going to enter a new market? Are you buying up companies? Maybe you're even launching like new service lines. That would be a time when I would switch up the gear and maybe mash it down a little bit. But other than that, feel comfortable coasting, because now you're a big guy in the area. You can defend yourself. You have years of experience and all of the reviews and hopefully a great, very happy customer base. SEO, this is normally like an enterprise level, and it's because you've got strong authority across multiple territories. You've got repeatable SEO and a content playbook that you roll out for each of the new locations. You're not necessarily inventing something new. You've got a good methodology, and it seems to be working as you're growing and scaling. And you've got constant, conversion rate work, because this is where like a tiny improvement, a small percentage, means massive gains in your value or your dollars back to your business. So always think about that, because as you're scaling up and you're much larger in revenue, these small changes, you could make a small change and it could have a terrible impact on your business. You could make a small change and it can have an incredible impact on your business in a positive way. So always kind of keep that in mind. And as you get bigger, it's sometimes hard to recall all of the things you did in the stages of growth leading up to this point. That's why I always reference, like, have a playbook, know what you did year over year, keep an Excel doc where you've got everything kind of mapped out, where you invested, where you had the most luck, where your ROI was the best. The last piece on that is really the aggregators. Essentially, in the 10 to 20 million range, or 20 million plus, it's an optional tool, and it's really just for experiments. Maybe you're going into a new city, or you want to see if there's a new niche that you want to test out. It's a great way to find out if there's demand before you roll out, with full media push. By the time the revenue MPH says 20 million plus, that growth dial is not just about more advertising, it's about strategy. So, where do you want to win next, and how much are you willing to invest to break out that new territory? All right, so let's ease off the gas and we're going to pull the car into the shop. We talked about two different gauges today that help you really decide your marketing and advertising percentage. You have your marketing RPM, which is really like your revs. It's the percentage of revenue that you're feeding back into marketing. Use the 7% of revenue as a rough maintain number, 10% for growth, and 13% when you really want to take over a market or you're forced to do that level just due to competition or saturation. Revenue MPH is your speed in millions per year. $1 million company, a $5 million company, a $30 million company can't use that exact same percentage forever, because as you grow, your marketing does get saturated. The percentage can come down, even though that dollar does get much bigger. So remember the simple example. 10% of 3 million is 300,000. 10% of 20 million is 2 million. So unless you are adding services or expanding your geography, there's no way to spend that kind of money efficiently. Trust me, I've seen it. I've been asked to do so. So you really have to be expanding your markets, adding in additional services if you want to really push that hard, unless you're not worried about efficiency. That's why the larger companies can live at the 6%, and even 4%. So, I obviously worked for a company. We had a lot of success in the 4.5% to 5% range. And we did not necessarily dominate the market, but that wasn't the goal we were after. It was really, we were looking to maintain the level of business and protect it. And there were times when we had to push harder than we typically would. So I've got a little homework for you. I want you to pull the last 12 months of your revenue and then pull the last 12 months of your marketing and advertising spend. Divide the spend by the revenue figure and find out what your true marketing RPM is. And then ask yourself an honest question. Does that number line up with the gear that you say you're in and the revenue MPH that your business is running at? If you say that you want to grow and you're spending like you want to maintain, then that's not a marketing problem, it's a math problem. And that is fairly common, and it is hard, trust me. We've been in so many meetings and had so many phone calls and conversations where it is very difficult for businesses to understand like what that grind looks like. And that's why I kind of tried to put together these stair steps for you, and so that you could kind of understand the two, dials that we look at. It's not as easy as saying marketing percentage based on revenue. You have to take what the actual revenue is into account. So that's it for me today. If you got value from this episode, do me a favor. Follow Contractors Edge on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen. Leave a rating or review and share this with another contractor who's, really arguing with themselves or even their agency over what their marketing budget should be right now. I'm Mike Stiers. Thank you for listening. Go check your numbers, and I'll catch you on the next episode.